Hello, friends, and welcome to my podcast, Woman of the Cloth, where I discuss growing ever more shameless, fearless, and authentic in a world of conformity. I'm Carmen Shank. Hello, friends. Today I want to talk about some things that have been rattling around in my mind about being a woman of the cloth. I have been intrigued by that phrase for quite some time, woman of the cloth. And one of the things that I love about it is that it's a play on words. You know, we use the phrase man of the cloth to reference a priest or a father or pastor, that kind of thing. But we don't generally use that phrase about a woman, which is intriguing to me, not just because there's this idea of some kind of baggage in church history against women in leadership, but also because language matters. What does it mean to be a man of the cloth? What's the cloth? Is it a hierarchical kind of the cardinal wears the red cloth, the Pope wears a certain kind of cloth, somebody else wears a certain kind of cloth? Is it part of that hierarchical Catholic system where there are different cloths that reference different, what do you say, ranks, I guess? Not being Catholic, I'm shooting in the dark here. Is it a reference to the robes that they wear in some denominations? What is it? I don't really have an answer for that, but I'm intrigued by that idea. And I have come to call myself a woman of the cloth, both in terms of a person who communicates about faith and a person who wears cloth, because that kind of seems like a normal thing. But what's interesting to me also is that cloth is so expressive. And I'm sitting here with my loom. I've got what I think is going to be a beautiful piece of cloth on here. This is very unusual for me. It is got a lot of black yarn on one side of the loom, a lot of cream yarn on the other side of the loom. And then I have actually warped the loom with a lot of pastel colors and more tonal colors. And so what has happened is if you take a step back from it, it reads as gray in the middle. And it actually reads as a bit of a gentle gradation from dark on my left to this lighter color on my right. So I really love this idea of being a woman of the cloth. I can take yarn and I can make cloth, and then I can, from the cloth, make a garment. In this case, I intend to make a skirt out of this. And if I have a little bit extra, I might make a bag as well. So it's creative process, absolutely from the get-go. Now, I don't spin wool yet. That's on my list of things to learn. But a friend of mine spun this yarn, actually. I don't have much of it left. I used it in my last project. But how good would it be to be able to go from spinning the yarn, weaving the cloth, making the garment from, it's just such an interesting and creative process. I really love this whole thing of sitting at the loom and sitting here with the yarn on the wall beside me and being able to choose, okay, next I'm going to use that color. I have a bowl here beside me of yarn that I have chosen from the wall for this project. You can see the variegated yarn that I have chosen to use, mostly in the warp. So this, I think, being a woman of cloth in this sense as being a weaver is so much fun. I'm an artist, a crafter, a creator, a maker. Those are words I use to describe myself, and that process of going from a strand of thread to a piece of cloth. And all of the work that takes, all of the dedication, all of the, because weaving is such a creative zone place for me, and a place of the flow, a place I love to be. It's a place of peace for me. I will maybe turn on a podcast and listen, or turn on some music and listen, or turn on a camera and talk. This is a place where my hands are busy, but my mind and my spirit is just always moving. It's just in the flow. And so in that sense, being a woman of the cloth is an extremely creative, slow cloth, just really cool expression, personal expression. And finally, one of the things I've really been thinking about in the last few days is this idea that clothing, the way that we dress ourselves, is a way of communicating. And over the last couple of years, I've really been feeling dissatisfied with my wardrobe. I wear very normal clothes. I'm a thrifter. I can go into the thrift store and, pick a couple of things, and if they more or less fit and they're colors that I can stand, then, I go home with a new summer wardrobe, like 4 or 5 dresses, and, I have, that's a whole new wardrobe for me. It's just, I have done a lot of searching thrift stores, and my favorite online store is ThredUp. Looking through thrifted clothes is something I really, really enjoy, but it's not really, it's working for me in one sense, but in another sense it's not working for me. I'm not quite sure if that's going to make any sense, but I'm still looking for something I haven't found. I'm still looking for something that says, ooh, that's me, that's Carmen. And I've got a lot of great clothes, a lot of great thrift store finds, but I'm still not sure that I have found my style. And I mean style in so much of a broader sense than we usually use it. Fashion is so narrow. Style is really, but I don't feel like I've necessarily been successful about expressing who I am. But I have started by going back in time. I made a duster in kind of inspired by the Miss Fisher Mysteries television show. Very 1920s. I've made a couple of cloche hats. I've got a couple of shoes. I painted a couple of pairs of shoes to match various outfits that are in kind of 1920s styles. Thrift store finds, dressing, made a few things, but mostly just experimented with taking modern clothes and giving them a vintage feel. So I have explored the 1920s. I've got some gray things in my closet. Yes, gray things. In my closet that are kind of channeling a 1930s, 1940s vibe, a little vintage suit set kind of look. It's all modern clothes, but it has that look. It has a similar cut to the way those clothes were made. I'm on the hunt for a 1930s material, some things I can use to make a 1930s or 40s kind of hat. I may make some things from the 18th century. There's this whole range of history to choose from to make clothing to express myself. And that's fun. But I don't think any one garment or any one era feels like home to me. Maybe in some sense the 20s kind of feel like home for me because physically I have sort of a 1920s kind of face. A face that lends itself to 1920s makeup. So those are things that I'm exploring. But then recently I've come across this word, I guess, hashtag, cottagecore. I was trying to figure out what that was, so I was checking it out on Wikipedia, and I wasn't quite sure I understood what was happening on the Wikipedia definition. So I found a Facebook group, a very diverse cottagecore group, and so it seemed to me that there was some crossover, some linkage, or some common ground, should I say, between my Mennonite heritage, where the old orders wear, and some of my ancestors would have worn a very specific kind of fashion statement, especially the women, and then some of the cottagecore people seem to be hitting a very similar note, very agrarian, very skirts and simple. Some of it's very simple, an indistinct era, Some of it has a little bit of that European dirndl look. Some of it it's a different ethnicity kind of. There seems to be a lot of kind of nostalgia, a little bit fantasy, there's a lot. It's just a lot. It seemed to me like maybe there was some kind of common ground fashion-wise between my Mennonite heritage and some of the things that Cottagecore people were doing. So I asked a question in the group, do you see these two as being compatible? And what I got back was way more than I expected, and some really super thoughtful, well thought out answers that I just blew me away. And so I've been thinking about this now for the last, because I think the moderator was expecting there to be a problem. So basically she said, I have to go now, so we're going to cut off comments in this question. But thank you all for playing nice. So I guess they've had religious folk come in and not play nice, which is really, really, really sad and infuriating to me. And it was also interesting how much there was that, oh, Mennonites are this little thing. And I found myself internally reacting. Yes, I have Mennonite heritage, but I am not a traditional housewife type of person. That's not who I have ever been. And my husband does dishes, and that's not my thing. Yeah, we'll talk about that on another day. But it was interesting to see how those particular individuals were responding to what it means to be Mennonite in this kind of very specific, they were seeing it in a specific way, which is not how I see it, clearly. So that part was interesting. But also talking more about what Cottagecore is. And I was just absolutely fascinated. And then I did some searching into Cottagecore history and found some lesbian writing about the ways lesbian women would dress and little things that they would wear to communicate in a hostile environment that this is who they were, that they could see somebody else wearing the same thing and be like, oh, we are part of this, we understand that this is a signal. And so clothing was used to communicate. And just like clothing is used to communicate, I fit in, or clothing is used to communicate, this is our group. I was with a couple of folks from a Mustang club. They have a car club, and the guy had a tie that had some sort of Mustang stuff on it. And so he was signaling that he's a car guy, okay? Men's wear ties all the time, have, I root for this team, or I'm a golfer, or all these little, I'm a fisherman and there's fish on the tie, whatever. I mean, we use clothing to communicate in much more subtle ways than a necktie that has a Virginia Tech logo on it. And that article was making the point that cloth is what we twist it into. It is, the twist on this yarn that brings together one color with another. I mean, I have a beautiful dove gray piece of yarn here in my hand that is a twist together of ivory and a beautiful gray. And even though I don't usually enjoy gray, this is a beautiful piece of yarn. I like a lot more color, but it's still that twisting together. And I think in our clothing, in the way we present ourselves, we may not understand that we are conforming to a statement in our particular group. For example, I was at a very Orthodox Christian event, worship conference. There's a very specific kind of Christian that shows up at these things. And I had color in my hair. I mean, I've worn color in my hair. I mean, I'm not talking about blonde streaks or highlights or something like that. I'm talking about color, like my hair was pink or purple or whatever it was that back then. So I went into the bathroom and came out, looked at my hair, made a comment, and then there was another woman standing there, and you could tell that she was kind of like trying to be careful about what she said. But then I don't remember what her words were. I have no recollection of what she actually said, but I do remember that it hit me like that in an instant. She has made the judgment and the assumption that I'm not a Christian because I have color in my hair. And once I realized that that's where the conversation had suddenly gone, I could look at her and see that, yes, she's coming from, you could see by her uniform that she was coming from a certain subset of Christianity. And so without necessarily communicating this with words, we had a moment where we each sized each other up. And I don't know if my assumptions about her were inaccurate, but hers were certainly inaccurate about me. So it was just a moment where it brought home to me how much clothing is a communicator. And I have felt for so long that, yeah, I love a thrift store find. I love a slightly unusual piece of clothing, or something that has got a kind of a historical vibe to it, or a beautiful color combination in clothing, or some flowing skirt, or a denim jacket that's hand painted. I love all of that. But I have not found yet a closet full of clothes that I feel really express who I am. I still feel like I'm wearing the normal expected thing. And I'm wanting out of that. It's feeling confining. It's feeling confining. And so I'm hoping that I can make some things. This is intended to be rather a spectacular skirt eventually. I'm hoping to make some things. I have made some alterations and changed some clothing. I have a gray jacket that I add black and white trim to, and now it's beautiful. It wasn't beautiful before, but now it's beautiful, and it's kind of more of a statement piece. I'm looking for ways to express who I am. And then as I was reading about cottagecore and its roots in the feminist movement, I was noting how interesting they are using fashion to bend and to blend the lines between hardcore feminine looking clothing and hardcore masculine looking clothing. Like a woman who would wear a skirt with a menswear suit, tie, vest, cravat, tall collar. I mean, who would be like from the waist up looking very formal masculine, and then wearing this big voluminous skirt from the waist down, and super crazy high heels. What a beautiful combination that is, because I have Pinterest too, and these are the things that appeal to me, and what a gorgeous combination that is. But then you deal with the people who are like, oh, but that's masculine. No, don't wear that, that's masculine. Or no, don't wear that, that's feminine. How about we step away from the conformity to, I know what this means, and therefore I can't wear it, or I can wear it, or I have to wear it. I know what this means. How can we step back from that and make the cloth mean, or liberate cloth from the meanings, liberate cloth from, ooh, that's masculine, that's feminine. I mean, actually it was interesting because there was a guy who came up to me. I think I had made a announcement or something in church about something, and somehow I'd made a comment about masculine colors and feminine colors, and about how wouldn't it be cool if we all felt the freedom to enjoy God's whole rainbow. And he came up to me later and he said, oh, as part of your education, young lady, you're going to need to know what patterns are masculine and what patterns are feminine. And I was shocked. I was shocked and surprised that somebody had decided that plaids were masculine and florals were feminine. I mean, yeah, I get the floral part, but plaids are masculine? And it was, stripes are masculine. I was a little bit surprised. I hope I was gracious. I know myself, and I probably was not. I try. I'm not very good at being gracious in moments like that when I think people are spouting just ridiculous stuff. But it was shocking. But I recognize that people do think that way. They think some things are masculine, and some people some men would not wear pink, and some men would wear pink on purpose because of the statement it makes. So I'm attracted to men who are comfortable in their masculinity and who'd wear any color just because that's personal expression, and that there's no holds barred, there's no taboos, there's no, how do we reclaim that ground of being able to wear beautiful cloth, beautiful colors, beautiful everything on the spectrum, everything that's been created, you know, suit coats and vests and a beautiful piece of cloth at the neck. How do we reclaim those beautiful aspects of fashion and use them creatively? Because, I mean, how can I dress as in a way that is expressive of who God has made me to be and still be confined in this very narrow, oh, it has to have a skirt, oh, it has to have a blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's starting to feel a little bit confining. And one of the things that I feel like God has called me to on so many different levels and in so many different ways is to walk away from conformity. Because the scripture says, be not conformed to the way of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So how is it that we can wrestle back some of these things that this cloth symbolizes this, or that this color symbolizes that? How can we use the language of cloth to say, I am a unique individual, I am confident, I am handsome, I am beautiful, I am created in the image of God, and this is how I choose to present myself. How do we celebrate the diversity of the way God made me versus the way God made you? How do we expand into the full range instead of allowing it to squish us in some little box? Because just like I could look at the woman in the bathroom who had sized me up and decided I wasn't a Christian based on the color of my hair, I could look at her and kind of get a feel for, oh, she's, you know, that neighborhood of the church. We don't always realize we're wearing uniforms. And I think maybe it's time we did. I mean, it's just, the whole thing fascinates me. So I'm wrestling with these things. I'm thinking about them. These are things that, when it's just me in the sunshine in the morning with the dog at my feet, these are the things that I think about and process. And I, you know, kind of got that introvert thing going on and kind of got that willing to explore and research and dive into things that fascinate me kind of thing going on. So I think the woman of the cloth thing means quite a lot to me. It means a very specific commentary that, yeah, there are men of the cloth and I applaud them and love them. Hallelujah. Pass the communion wafers. But I think it's time, well past time, that there are women of the cloth as leaders in the church. That is so past due. So past due. Secondly, I'm a woman of the cloth because I weave cloth. It is part of my heritage as a Mennonite. I'm descendant from a Mennonite weaver. And it's part of my creative expression. It's mental health. It's my time to just enjoy the flow. You know, put on a podcast, listen to some music, just enjoy the presence of the Holy Spirit as I weave and think and explore colors and see things jump off the wall. And it's like, ooh, that color needs to go in next. You know, I mean, this whole thing happens while I sit here at the loom, and that's what it means to be a woman of the cloth. Also, a woman of the cloth is a language. How do I learn to speak that language and use it as a way of breaking barriers between people, breaking barriers between groups, challenging barriers, challenging uniformity, conformity, challenging the uniform? How do I go about doing that in a way that expresses who God has created me to be, especially when that comes to being the little places where I'm different? And how can I celebrate my differences and celebrate our commonality in a way that's absolutely honest and in complete integrity with who I am, and also complete love and respect for anybody else who crosses my path? So these are the things that I am wrestling with, and I think you're probably going to hear things like this in the podcast quite a bit. I don't know what all's going to happen, but I really feel like there is this season that God has called me into to talk about some of the things that I have learned through the stories share the story, share the experiences of what it has meant to be a woman in a very patriarchal, male leadership dominated neighborhood of the church, which nevertheless has some really beautiful aspects. The peace and justice aspect of the Mennonite church, the pacifism, there's aspects of scripture that came out of the Reformation, that, the separation between church and state that came from the early Anabaptists. And that's still the call of my heart. I would really love to see more separation of church and state. I mean, especially in the last election, where it was so married, that using religion as a power struggle tool, as a way to gain dominance over other people. I could totally go on a pet peeve. I could totally go on a rant about that, but I need to wrap it up. This is not a political podcast. This is a journey of faith podcast, and it is a creative person creating cloth kind of podcast. So welcome to the journey. What does cloth mean to you? How do you use cloth to express yourself? How do you use cloth to signify that you're part of a group? How do we use cloth to size up somebody else? How do we use color and pattern and texture and all of those things to express ourselves and to say something about who we are? All of that and so much more. So thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. And let's continue the conversation. Okay? Thanks for watching. You can follow me on Instagram at Carmen Rose Shank. You can subscribe to my channel on YouTube, please do. And you can download us on iTunes. Theme music by classical guitarist Jonathan Crispin. Show notes available at carmenshank.com.